A teenage model, smiling, carefree, floats over the ocean in a parasail. Then something changes. She begins screaming, fighting, and then she falls. Why did Tijana Radonjic, just 19 years old, undo her own harness in midair? And who, if anyone, could have stopped it? The footage left behind raises more questions than answers. A moment of panic came with fatal consequences for 19-year-old Serbian national Tijana Radonjic, who plummeted 160 feet to her death in May of 2025 while parasailing in Montenegro. A representative for the company that hosted the excursion had approached the young woman on a beach in Budva and invited her to join the outing for free in exchange for her participation in a promotional video. Showing no fear of flying, Radonjic accepted the offer and underwent a training brief before taking to the skies, but something went terribly wrong once the group was up in the air, and the teen began to panic while grabbing frantically at her life jacket and waist buckle. She unbuckled her harness and fell into the Adriatic Sea below. The tragedy was partially captured on video, which showed Radonjic tearing at her equipment and screaming, "Put me down!" Her body was recovered from the water afterward, and police are reportedly investigating in an attempt to learn more about the circumstances surrounding the incident. Radonjic had no previous parasailing experience, but she showed no signs of fear until she became airborne, leaving witnesses and her loved ones perplexed by her sudden panic. Number 16. Jason Tomes. Shortly before 4 a.m. on a Friday morning in April of 2017, police responded to a reported shooting at a Louisville, Kentucky home where they found 32-year-old Christine L. Hawthorne dead from a gunshot wound to the head. Officers arrested 38-year-old Jason Tomes, who had just met the victim earlier that night. Tomes and Hawthorne had met at the home of a mutual friend, where they engaged in casual conversation and watched music videos before Tomes pulled a gun and shot Hawthorne in an unprovoked fashion. He had a criminal record dating back 20 years and had been released from prison just 10 months earlier after serving time for a stabbing conviction. Tomes was reportedly homeless and living in the woods at the time of the shooting, and occasionally visited the residence to wash up and eat. He initially denied any involvement in the crime, but eventually confessed to shooting Hawthorne, claiming that he felt threatened, but refusing to go any further into detail. The person who witnessed the shooting told police that Tomes shot Hawthorne out of nowhere and had a strange look on his face after pulling the trigger. Tomes' destructive behavior continued after investigators left him alone in the interrogation room, where he kicked a hole in the wall, urinated on the floor, and tore a dry erase board off the wall. He charged at officers twice when they attempted to re-enter the room, but was eventually subdued and booked into custody. During the summer of 2018, roughly 15 months after the shooting, Tomes pleaded guilty to murder, possession of a handgun by a convicted felon, and criminal mischief. He was sentenced to 35 years in prison and will become eligible for parole in April of 2037. Number 15. Richard Rotter. Police officer Dan Roca was killed in the line of duty in March of 2022 while attempting to arrest an uncooperative suspect near a Starbucks cafe in Everett, Washington. The suspect, Richard Rotter, shot Roca several times before running over the officer's body as he fled the scene in a vehicle. He was charged with aggravated first-degree murder, unlawful possession of a firearm, possession of a controlled substance with intent to manufacture, and attempting to elude a police vehicle. During Rotter's trial in the spring of 2023, the defense argued that he had acted on impulse caused by mental illness and drug abuse. They also blamed the defendant's behavior on a brain injury from a past car accident and multiple concussions Rotter had supposedly sustained throughout his childhood while playing sports. A court-appointed psychologist testified that Rotter suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder stemming from previous run-ins with law enforcement and that he lacked the capacity to act in a planned fashion. The prosecution refuted these claims, arguing that Rotter had acted in a premeditated fashion. To support its argument, the state showed the jury footage of the suspect moving guns between two vehicles, acting evasive, and lying to Roca about having guns in his possession. Rotter was found guilty as charged, resulting in a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Number 14. Stevonte Wood. In May of 2025, residents of Jeffersonville, Kentucky neighborhood contacted off-duty police officer Stevonte Wood about a mentally unstable man who was causing concern among civilians. According to reports, 43-year-old Marco Dorsey was damaging homes and threatening to harm people while rampaging through the streets. Jeffersontown Police Chief Rick Sanders would later tell reporters that the disturbed man threw garbage cans, smashed car windows with his fists, and tried breaking into multiple homes. After noticing Dorsey outside his home, 29-year-old Wood went outside with his police radio and gun in an apparent attempt to de-escalate the situation. He introduced himself and told Dorsey to stop, but the irrational and erratic behavior continued. Wood radioed dispatch and requested a crisis intervention response with a less than lethal weapon, but by the time law enforcement arrived, he had shot Dorsey several times, killing him at the scene. He claimed that Dorsey had charged at him, while a witness told police that they had seen Dorsey reaching behind his back, making them think he was reaching for a weapon. But investigators found no weapons at the scene, leading to the conclusion that Dorsey was unarmed when he was shot. Wood is on paid administrative leave amid the ongoing investigation, which is being conducted by the Kentucky State Police. Number 13. Devin Williams Jr. Overcome with jealousy over his former mistress's marriage to another man, a California sheriff's deputy murdered the couple in their Dublin home in September of 2022. 24-year-old Devin Williams Jr. had failed a psychological exam to become a law enforcement officer and had been let go during his probationary period with the Stockton Police Department. Yet he somehow still managed to land a job with the Alameda County Sheriff's Office. Apparently unable to contain his anger toward his ex for moving on, he fatally shot 42-year-old Maria Tran and her husband, 57-year-old Benison Tran, shortly after finishing his shift at the Santa Rita jail. In the weeks leading up to the double homicide, law enforcement had responded to an incident at the Tran's home involving Williams, who was repeatedly ringing the couple's doorbell. He was also seen having an intense and visibly upsetting conversation with Maria at her workplace. On the day of the murders, Williams reportedly entered the Tran's residence with a gun and confronted Maria about her continued relationship with her husband. Benison managed to call 911 before Williams made the irreversible decision to shoot him in the head, and Maria was killed while attempting to disarm her former lover, who fled the scene and later turned himself in. In October of 2024, Williams was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive terms of 25 years to life and will be in his mid-70s when he becomes eligible for parole. Number 12. Peter McKinney. A dispute between roommates ended in deadly violence in July of 2024 when 22-year-old Peter J. McKinney fatally shot 25-year-old Sebastian E. Crawford at their Wichita, Kansas apartment. Officers arrived to find Crawford dead from a single bullet wound, and McKinney was charged with second-degree unintentional but reckless murder. While these types of cases typically take months or longer to resolve, McKinney took a plea deal less than a month after the shooting. He entered an Alford plea to a reduced voluntary manslaughter charge, which means that he maintained his innocence while acknowledging that the prosecution likely had a strong enough case to secure a conviction against him. After initially telling police that he thought the gun was unloaded when it discharged, McKinney admitted in court that he fatally shot Crawford in the heat of passion and knowingly. He was sentenced to 59 months in prison and will be required to register as a violent offender for 15 years following his release. McKinney's motive for the crime and the circumstances leading up to the killing remain unclear. Number 11. Kyon McDonald. 33-year-old Tyrese Owens was shot dead during a confrontation outside a sports bar in Plymouth, Pennsylvania in late September of 2018. The shooter, 38-year-old Kyon McDonald, claimed he had acted in self-defense and that Owens was threatening to kill him when the incident occurred. Surveillance footage reportedly showed Owens charging at McDonald, who could be seen firing a single round before waiting a few seconds and shooting 6 more times. Owens was unarmed at the time of his death, and prosecutors charged McDonald with first-degree murder after concluding that his use of force was unjustified. The defense argued that McDonald's actions resulted from a split-second decision, thereby lacking the premeditation necessary for a first-degree murder conviction. McDonald would have faced a mandatory life sentence without parole if convicted as charged, but the jury found him guilty of the lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter following his trial in early 2022. He was sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison with credit for more than 3 years of time served in pre-trial lockup, where he was known as a model inmate with no disciplinary issues. Number 10. Ryan Scott Avery. 70-year-old Deborah Ann Avery was found dead in a chair at her Aurora, Colorado home on June 20th of 2021. She had been shot 3 times, including twice in the face and once in the chest by her own son, 39-year-old Ryan Scott Avery. According to court documents, Ryan was upset that his sister had recently taken over their aging mother's finances. In the days following Deborah's murder, he was accused of committing an attempted assault and felony menacing against 2 separate victims. All 3 crimes were committed using the same handgun and ammunition, which were found in Ryan's vehicle. In August of 2024, an Arapahoe County jury found Ryan guilty of second-degree murder in the heat of passion, first-degree attempted assault with a deadly weapon, and felony menacing. He was sentenced to 48 years in prison and will be 70 years old when he becomes eligible for parole in 2052, but could remain behind bars until the age of 87. Number 9. Litara Sheila Jones. 43-year-old Jermaine Javon Wright was stabbed to death during a heated fight at an Ann Arbor, Michigan hotel in November of 2023. The accused killer, 40-year-old Litara Sheila Jones of Ypsilanti, told investigators with the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office that Wright had gotten jealous because she was hugging people during a trip to the store to buy alcohol. He stormed off and walked back to the hotel room that he and Jones were sharing, while Jones took a bus back to the room. Jones claimed that Wright had grabbed her arm and slapped her during the argument that ensued, at which point she stabbed him in the chest. Wright succumbed to his injuries after being found unresponsive at the scene and rushed to the hospital, and Jones was charged with open murder. Her attorneys argued for a reduced voluntary manslaughter charge on the basis that their client had stabbed Wright in the heat of passion, writing in a motion that the defendant's actions were caused by adequate provocation. On the first scheduled morning of her trial in March of 2025, Jones pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter. She received a prison sentence of 4 to 15 years and could be released as early as November of 2027, while records list a maximum discharge date of November 2038. Number 8. Jaquan Stites. At around 8 p.m., one evening in December of 2023, Tulsa police were called to the scene of a double shooting at a Quick Trip gas station. A woman had been shot in the chest during an argument with a group of people and was still alert, while her boyfriend, 24-year-old Kareem King, was clinging to life with a gunshot wound to the head. King died from his injuries after being rushed to the hospital in critical condition, and 26-year-old Jaquan Stites was identified as the shooter. Stites was booked into the Tulsa County Jail, where he remains held without bail on charges of first-degree manslaughter in the heat of passion, being a convicted felon in possession of a weapon, assault and battery with a deadly weapon, speeding, and operation of a motor vehicle without a driver's license. Number 7. Brenden Jamel Reynolds. An encounter between rivals ended in tragedy in June of 2021 when 20-year-old Javon Andrew Malone and 22-year-old Brenden Jamel Reynolds crossed paths at Thompson County Park in West St. Paul, Minnesota. Surveillance footage showed Reynolds pulling up to the scene on a motorcycle and punching Malone in the face before opening fire on the victim. Officers arrived at the scene to find Malone lying in the grass while 2 people applied pressure to his wounds. He was rushed to the hospital where he later died from his injuries, and Reynolds was charged with second-degree murder. In February of 2024, Reynolds pleaded guilty to a reduced first-degree manslaughter charge. More specifically, he admitted to intentionally causing Malone's death in the heat of passion. He also admitted to aggravating factors, including committing the crime in front of children and at a public park during operating hours. Prosecutors argue for a punishment above the typical sentencing guidelines, resulting in a nearly 11-year prison term with credit for 415 days of time served and a fine of nearly $7,600. Number 6. Paul Farley. 40-year-old Colorado inmate Paul Farley was serving time at Sterling Correctional Facility in 2012 when he killed his cellmate, 35-year-old James Romer, in a fit of rage. Romer was serving a 2-year trespassing sentence while Farley was serving time for manslaughter and aggravated robbery. The 2 men had requested each other as cellmates, but they had started having issues while sharing the small space. Farley initially claimed that he had found Romer dead in the cell, but soon became a suspect in the case. He would have become eligible for parole in 2015, but his prison time was extended by 15 years in May of 2019, following his guilty plea to a second-degree heat of passion murder charge. After admitting to the crime, Farley said that he had snapped when Romer verbally provoked him. He confessed to strangling Romer until he passed out and putting a bag over the victim's head until he stopped breathing. State prison records list a parole eligibility date of February 2027, but according to news reports, Farley will be extradited to Arizona to serve a 6-year sentence for an extortion charge. He is also expected to serve 2 federal prison terms of 30 and 46 months for mailing threatening communications. Number 5. Roberto Souffront. Shortly before 4 a.m. one morning in December of 2013, 53-year-old Roberto Souffront caught his wife in bed with another man inside a trailer in Williamstown, Pennsylvania. Apparently unable to contain his anger, he fatally shot the man his wife was with, 27-year-old James W. Harbst. During police questioning several hours later, Souffront said that he and his wife had gotten into an argument over prescription medication about 12 hours before the shooting. His wife left their home, and when she wouldn't answer her phone, Souffront walked to the trailer. He already suspected his wife of having an affair with Harbst and had seen her getting in a car with the man. Souffront returned home, retrieved his gun, then walked back to the trailer, where he found his wife and Harbst in a compromising situation. Harbst was initially able to disarm Souffront, who managed to regain control of the weapon and fired until the gun was empty, shooting Harbst 3 times. Prosecutors charged Souffront with second-degree murder, but a jury found him guilty of voluntary manslaughter in April of 2015 after concluding that he had acted in the heat of passion. He was sentenced to 7.5 to 20 years in prison. Number 4. Adam Coy. In late December of 2020, 48-year-old police officer Adam Coy responded to a non-emergency call about a car repeatedly being turned on and off at a Columbus, Ohio residence. He arrived at the scene shortly before 2 a.m. and encountered 47-year-old Andre Hill, who was leaving a friend's house, mistaking Hill's illuminated smartphone and keyring as a weapon. Coy ordered the man to show his hands and shot him several times, striking him 3 times in the leg and once in the chest. Instead of rendering first aid, responding officers handcuffed Hill, who was lying unresponsive on the ground. He was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital, and the case was ruled a homicide. Coy was fired from the police department 8 days after the shooting. In early 2025, he was indicted on charges of murder, felonious assault, and 2 counts of dereliction of duty. He pleaded not guilty, and the case finally went to trial in October of 2024 after encountering numerous delays. Following the proceedings, the jury found Coy guilty of murder, felonious assault, and reckless homicide. He faced a mandatory sentence of 15 years to life, but his sentencing has been delayed indefinitely as he challenges his case. Coy's defense attorneys have accused prosecutors of withholding information about an expert witness and are hoping to win a new trial. Number 3. Marcus Bebb-Jones. British poker champion Marcus Bebb-Jones and his wife Sabrina lived in Grand Junction, Colorado, where they owned the Melrose Hotel. Their seemingly ordinary life fell apart in September of 1997 when Marcus survived a gunshot wound to the face. Sabrina was nowhere to be found, and Marcus claimed she had left him, causing him to fall into a pit of despair which led to his gunshot injury. The missing woman's whereabouts remained a mystery until 2004, when her skull was found by a cattle rancher in rural Garfield County. By then, Marcus had returned to Britain, where he was making a living playing poker. He fell under legal scrutiny following the discovery of Sabrina's skull and was charged with first-degree murder in 2009 following a 5-year investigation after killing Sabrina and dumping her body. Marcus drove to Las Vegas and spent the next 3 days partying. He maxed out his deceased wife's credit cards, spending thousands of dollars on gambling, exotic dancers, cocaine, designer clothing, and a rented Ferrari. Employees at the hotel that Marcus and Sabrina owned recalled financial problems and tensions in the couple's marriage. Sabrina often got upset with Marcus for flirting with female guests, and authorities believe Marcus murdered her out of a fear of losing access to their son after Sabrina expressed her desire for a divorce. Marcus fought extradition following his arrest but was taken back to the US in 2011 after prosecutors agreed not to seek the death penalty. After initially maintaining his innocence, Marcus pleaded guilty to a reduced second-degree murder in the heat of passion charge in exchange for a prison sentence of no more than 20 years. Number 2. Americus De Orenday. In September of 2013, 43-year-old Americus De Orenday went to a police station in San Diego, California, and confessed to killing his estranged wife, 40-year-old Maria De Orenday. He told officers that he had gone to Maria's home to talk about saving their 9-year marriage after separating several months earlier. Americus already knew that Maria had started dating an 18-year-old co-worker, and he had been stalking the couple ever since he found out about the relationship. But he remained desperate to win Maria back, only to realize during the visit that she had no interest in getting back together with him. Overcome with anger, Americus strangled Maria to death while they were sitting in his truck. He kept the body with him for the next 2 days before surrendering to law enforcement and was charged with murder. The defense argued that Americus acted in the heat of passion and pushed for a voluntary manslaughter conviction, while the prosecution claimed that there had been signs of impending violence. In addition to having a history of aggression toward women, Americus had reportedly told several people that he would do something stupid if he ever caught Maria with her new boyfriend. He had also made disturbing comments to he and Maria's children about how they would feel if he killed their mother. In January of 2015, a jury found Americus De Orenday guilty of first-degree murder, resulting in a prison sentence of 25 years to life. Hang back with me after number 1 to also check out our release from a while back about when simple misunderstandings go wrong. Number 1. Haddon Jacobs. In a shocking act of violence that was captured on video in June of 2023, 32-year-old Jordan Robinson was gunned down outside his Pueblo, Colorado home by 3 men. The suspects, later identified as 31-year-old Haddon Jacobs, 30-year-old Jacob Rizzo, and 31-year-old Aaron Canoni, drove to Robinson's home in separate vehicles and chased him across the parking lot of his apartment building. Surveillance footage showed Robinson getting into his vehicle as Jacobs approached the passenger side and smashed the window with the butt end of a rifle. According to court records, Robinson could be seen pulling away from the scene while Jacobs and Canoni shot at him, and Rizzo pulled a gun from his hip holster. Prosecutors accused the suspects of attacking Robinson in retaliation for a recent fight he had gotten into with Jacobs' stepfather. Jacobs was charged with second-degree murder but pleaded guilty to a reduced count of second-degree murder in the heat of passion. As part of an agreement with prosecutors, he was sentenced to 12 years in prison, followed by 3 years of parole, which seemed like a far cry from justice for Robinson's family. The cases against Rizzo and Canoni are ongoing. On March the 25th of 2024, 81-year-old William Brock, mistaking an innocent Uber driver for a robber, shot 61-year-old Litara Hall dead in front of his home in Clark County, Ohio. He had been the victim of a phone call scam, wherein a relative of his called him from jail, demanding money. Not long after, Hall showed up, claiming she had been sent to pick up a package. Brock menaced her with a revolver, then shot her 3 times and called 911. Authorities received a call from Brock saying that he had shot somebody who was attempting to rob him. What they found when they arrived at the scene was a 61-year-old woman lying on the ground, bleeding out from multiple gunshot wounds. They were ultimately unable to save her. Thanks to video footage from her dashcam, they determined that she presented no threat to Brock. Because of that, and since he did not contact authorities until after firing at her, they arrested him and charged him with murder. As of the latest updates, legal proceedings in the case are ongoing. Number 7. It's about respect. On October the 11th of 2019, 24-year-old Melvonta Jones fatally shot his own stepfather inside his Milwaukee, Wisconsin home. The murder was witnessed firsthand by the victim's wife, along with Jones's 7-year-old half-sister. Jones confronted Benjamin Sims Sr. and at gunpoint told him not to disrespect him, his mother, or his family, then pulled the trigger. Sharita Sims, the wife of the victim, and also Jones's mother, stated that the entire incident stemmed from a misunderstanding. She did not elaborate much further on the matter, but Jones himself later told investigators that he felt disrespected and distanced from his mother and family by the victim. He also stated that he did not originally intend to shoot the victim but to scare him. He had intended to fire a warning shot that missed the victim but ended up hitting him twice in the head and abdomen. In the aftermath, Jones was charged with reckless homicide, among other crimes. On July the 20th of 2020, he was sentenced to 22 years in prison, along with 8 years of extended supervision. He also had to pay $5,000 in restitution to his own mother and half-sister. Sharita Sims reported after the fact that she was traumatized by the event, claiming to be scared not only of her own son, but of everyone around her, leaving her a nervous wreck and unable to leave the house or even eat. Number 6. That's not my face. In September of 2023, an innocent man was arrested in Houston, Texas, because of a case of mistaken identity that stemmed from a picture posted on Facebook. 19-year-old Austin Colson was driving home from a shift delivering pizzas when he was pulled over for failure to make a complete stop at a signal light. He was already more than a little scared, this being his first traffic stop, but when a second deputy showed up, he went from terrified to terribly confused. The deputy informed him that he had a warrant out for assault in San Marcos, over 200 miles away, and took him into custody. After roughly 16 hours in jail, Colson was set free with officers unwilling to answer his questions. He and his father teamed up to reach out to Hays County officials and figure out what had happened. An assault had taken place in San Marcos back in 2021 when multiple assailants attacked a man outside a bar. One of the attackers was from Colson's hometown, and when the victim was shown photos from that man's Facebook, he fingered Colson as another attacker. Officers found that Colson attended Texas State University, which would place him in the vicinity of the crime. This information turned out to be incorrect. Colson was enrolled at Sam Houston State University. The oversight was underscored by San Marcos police officer Kyle Lobo, who claimed to have collaborated with Texas State University to identify Colson. Since Colson was not a student there, this claim ultimately rang hollow. Because of this incident, Colson is bringing a formal lawsuit against the city of San Marcos, the police department, and several individuals that were directly involved in the botched investigation and subsequent arrest. U.S. law states that all defendants are innocent until proven guilty, but Colson, forced to prove his innocence, seeks to hold officials accountable. As of the latest updates, legal proceedings in the suit are ongoing. Number 5. 3 days too long. On May the 20th of 2015, then 32-year-old Maria Rodello of Lindsay, California, was pulled over for using her cell phone while driving, then subsequently arrested on 2 outstanding warrants for crimes that she did not commit. She was forced to spend 3 days in jail before officials realized their error, and according to Rodello, that time was full of traumatizing incidents, such as being ridiculed by jail staff. I was treated like a criminal before I even went to jail. I felt violated, Rodello added. The charges, she says, were not clear. The warrants were not hers, and she was behind bars for 2 nights and 3 days. Rodello said it was horrible, humiliating. Her ordeal ended on May 22nd in front of a judge who let her go. They kept apologizing to me, Rodello said. The public defender who'd seen me, he was in shock and said Tulare police had no right to arrest me. Rodello decided to hold the county and the cops accountable. She reached out to a local law firm and filed a claim against both the city and county of Tulare, 2 separate entities that both had a hand in the arrest. The ultimate outcome of that claim and whether it was escalated to a full lawsuit remains unclear. Number 4. Never get between a man and his smokes. In January of 2024, 34-year-old Desmond Francis was gunned down outside a smoke shop in Brooklyn, New York, by a friend who failed to identify him at the time. Francis was seen on video strolling into the shop, then playfully snatching 2 bags from a customer. He stood outside the store laughing, waiting for his friend to come out and reclaim his baggage when he was shot in the chest. His friend didn't realize who had taken his items and thought he was actually being robbed. When the shooter realized what had happened, he frantically dialed 911. He could be heard on the line apologizing to his friend, explaining that he didn't realize it was him. Sadly, his apologies and the best efforts of medics were no help. Francis was taken to a local hospital for treatment, but succumbed to his wounds. The shooter reportedly remained by the victim's side until he heard sirens, then fled. As of the latest updates, he remains at large. Francis's mother, whom he lived with at the time, expressed her devastation to local news crews covering the incident. She explained that her son was working on fixing up 2 freight trucks that he had recently bought in an attempt to start his own trucking company. Sadly, that dream, along with his life, was cut short by a case of mistaken identity. Number 3. Ground control loses control. In May of 2010, a plane crashed near Kabul, Afghanistan, as the result of botched communications between the pilots and air traffic control. 44 people aboard met an abrupt end, with 3 British men among them: 51-year-old Christopher Carter, 28-year-old David Taylor, and 40-year-old Daniel Saville. Being on board prompted British authorities to get involved in the investigation into the deadly crash. Everybody aboard was killed, but thanks to recordings and instrument readings, investigators were able to piece together what happened. Not long before the crash, the crew had requested permission to descend, likely due to bad weather in the area. Despite being denied permission due to dangerous conditions below, the plane began to make its way down. Once the plane started heading down, Traffic control tried to warn the pilots of the danger below and warned them that they were descending too quickly. Somehow, the pilots did not heed that grim herald and ultimately crashed the plane into the side of a mountain. The families of the 3 British men aboard expressed that they could not accept the conclusion of the saga in its current state. The reason for the breakdown in communication is still not clear. Over a decade later, it's suspected that a lack of strict regulation in Afghan airspace, a language barrier, and previous false proximity alerts leading up to the crash are to blame. A verdict of accidental death was passed down and nobody in traffic control was pinpointed, nor were presiding authorities held accountable. Number 2. Felon goes free. On September the 13th of 2023, 28-year-old Kevin Mason was mistakenly released from a jail in Indianapolis, Indiana, due to a clerical error. Mason was in prison awaiting trial in connection to the fatal shooting of 29-year-old Dontivius Catchins, who was killed in a parking lot outside of a Minneapolis church in June of 2021. As soon as authorities figured out the error later that same day, the manhunt was on. More than 100 officers from various agencies in the area began searching and pieced together that he had already left the immediate area. The search was expanded and more officers and agencies got involved. Over the course of 2 weeks, local police, sheriffs, deputies, and even the Federal Bureau of Investigation joined in the search. They learned that Mason had ties to various people in the Minnesota area. After involving the U.S. Marshals, among other agencies, and offering a $10,000 reward, investigators finally caught a break and zeroed in on a home in South St. Paul, Minnesota. They obtained a warrant to enter the home and see who was inside, and it was there that they finally found the suspect and hauled him back in. As of the latest updates, the case is still ongoing. Number 1. New York beatdown leads to payout. In August of 2022, 3 police officers from New York were ordered to pay out a grand total of $191,000 to 31-year-old William Kleinfeld in connection with a wrongful arrest that happened in 2015. Of the 3 cops, 1 is no longer on the force and 1 was undercover, and thus has not had their identity publicized. The faulty arrest went down as part of an undercover drug sting. An unidentified officer allegedly approached a woman and handed her some money, which the woman then gave to Kleinfeld. From there, Kleinfeld and several unidentified parties found the undercover officer, surrounded them, and used force in an attempted robbery. Kleinfeld was then taken down by the undercover officer, along with 52-year-old officer Yanara Morales and 46-year-old Hugo Ortega. This is all according to the officers, at least. That version of events that the officers told their high-ranking officials quickly fell apart in court. Video of the incident showed that there was no handoff and there was no robbery. Instead, Kleinfeld was surrounded and brutalized, with some highlights including Morales kicking him in the face while he was down and Ortega punching him in the gut. Officers maintained that he got those injuries from resisting arrest, a charge which did not make it onto Kleinfeld's rap sheet in court. To make matters worse, Morales later failed a drug test, was kicked off the force, then blamed it all on another officer using Santeria magic to strengthen herself and curse others. Those wild claims that could have been used in court to tear down Morales' credibility did not impress the judge, but the video did. Presented with all the evidence necessary to conclude that all 3 officers had lied and beaten an innocent man, the undercover officer was ordered to pay out just over $134,000, with the other 2 receiving lesser orders but still sizable orders. Thanks for watching. If you could either win the Powerball once or gain the lifelong ability to see 5 seconds into the future, which would you choose and why? Let us know in the comments section below.